liked by someone else, that we don't really remember the things that we're good at or things that we want to share with someone. It becomes about a strategy or a way through which someone else can just like us, can just be present for us. And it's really hard for us to sometimes remember that there are qualities innately within us, present within us, that people would really like us for. So, and I think that's sort of what I'd urge you to do today, right? Think about the things that you really like, think about the things that you really care about, and talk to someone about that. I can't think of a better way through which any of us can be liked than being authentically and completely ourselves, being wholly ourselves. And and I think sometimes that is also about vulnerability, that's about being seen, which I think is an incredibly hard thing to do. It's really, really hard to be seen by someone completely in everything that you are and everything that you are about as a person. Because what if the world doesn't like you? What if everyone rejects you, right? These are the thoughts that we end up thinking about and wondering about when we get that opportunity to reveal all parts of ourselves. So, the parts of ourselves that we feel strongly about, sensitively about. So, I guess I'm wondering that what could be ways in which we could start this process of vulnerability, as Brené Brown says. Um, and yeah, so Smriti here is mentioning in the comments that it's about our feelings, it's about our thoughts, it's about sharing all of those things, which helps us initiate a conversation. So I guess initiating a conversation isn't necessarily an activity that is so artificial in nature, right? Like, I think that's my problem with how dating websites talk about it or how apps talk about it. That this exercise isn't about a strategy or a method through which you have to get someone, but it's just an activity through which you're trying to have a meaningful connection with another human being. And the best way to do that is to just try to find parts of yourself that you'd like to share with the world. And trust me, there's so many parts that you would want to share with the world. So, questions. I think sometimes a lot of this process is really hard to start, is really hard to think about because we're so scared of rejection. It's so difficult to think about what we would do if someone rejects us completely. And I think a good way to look at it is, I think in terms of choice, that our choice here is to care about someone, is to love someone, and is to be vulnerable in front of someone, which is a separate choice than what that person thinks about us or what that person considers. And we would still probably care just as much about them, even if they didn't think the same thing. But sometimes, if someone does reject us, I think one also has to take into account or in consideration the fact that it's not so much about you, it's also about where that person is in life, what that person is thinking, what that person is feeling. And either way, whether it's a yes or a no, we have to make sure that we give this our best shot if we really feel something really strongly about someone, right? And that's what's most essential. That's what's most important in these moments, that you're not left with any regret or resentment or doubt that could I have done something better? Could I have done something more? And these should not be the thoughts that we are left with at the end of the day, right? So that, I think, is the only thing that sort of lies within our control, because everything else isn't. So if there's someone who doesn't like you, if there's someone who likes you, you'll only get to know that once you do reveal that part of yourself. And B, that's not something that's in your control. But what is in your control is to initiate that conversation, is to begin that conversation and just see where this goes, just see where this starts. And until we take that chance, it's really, really hard for anything to begin. So, one of the questions that we're getting right now is that what do you do when you like someone of the same sex? So, I don't think the process of initiating a conversation changes necessarily. It's still about showing yourself, it's about being vulnerable, it's about sharing those parts of yourself. I realized that the social stigma there is so much more. Sometimes for some people the societal barriers are so much more that it's even more scarier for us to accept ourselves. And that makes it hard to initiate a conversation. It's not so much about the other person, but are we completely accepting ourselves here? um, and not just our queerness, but the things that maybe sometimes you wish you could change. Maybe it was easier for you to be normative on some days. And every single day, making that choice to be proud about your identity, making that choice to be out there, all of those things are really, really difficult to do. And I think once our self acceptance increases about those things, it becomes easier to be happier in the state that we are, and to be happier about talking to people of the same sex, and yeah, explicitly stating that attraction. So yeah, so we're also getting some other questions that oh, okay, and then someone's asking me that but what about if the person you likes looks like he or she is hetero? And again, I think I'd go back to my first point, that it isn't so much about. So again, like I don't think we always know what the other person's sexuality is until we start that conversation. And if it does turn out that the person doesn't align with your sexuality, I think it's still okay that you took that first step towards connection, towards something that was meaningful. It may not turn into a relationship, but it may still turn into a friendship. You may have found someone who you can talk to about something that's really important to you, or something that's really meaningful to you, which isn't necessarily about love or relationships or something. Yeah, or something that you would only want to share with a romantic partner. But I think connection is a really large term that encompasses so many different kinds of relationships. And yeah, and I think this is an opportunity for us to explore all of those kinds of relationships, and not just a romantic partnership. And okay, and one of the questions that we're constantly getting right now on our channels is that how do we get their attention, right? I think confidence and self belief, I think, automatically translate into something that's really attractive about us. That if we really care about ourselves, if we think well of ourselves, that's something that's automatically reflected in all of our actions. So, that for me is the most positive way in which we could get someone's attention, as well as we'll do a lot of good for ourselves. And yeah, and just be kind to ourselves, right? Like, I think those are qualities that everyone wants around them. Sometimes even when we're feeling really melancholic, if we're not feeling that good about ourselves, we want to be around the people who are feeling happy about the world or better about themselves. And yeah, and I think that's something that people automatically get attracted to. But apart from that, I think on a more simpler level, like, I think just generally being interested in the kind of things that the person that you like does, talking about that, starting a conversation about that, paying attention to what they want or what they think. But I think these are things that automatically come to us when we're attracted to someone, right? We pay a lot of attention to their likes, their dislikes, and in that process perhaps don't pay that much attention to ourselves. So that perhaps is what I want to converse more on today. um but yeah, but I realize that a lot of the viewers here are concerned about a romantic relationship specifically, and what happens if someone's friend zoned, or if you are not considered as a romantic partner. um I think, and I'm sure there are a lot of perspectives here, but my perspective is that it's important to understand what that person wants, you know. The funny thing is that we keep chasing monogamy through most of our life, but we don't realize that that monogamy can only be shared by one person, and each person has a different kind of fit in our life. So through your 20s or your 30s, you may meet a lot of people who may fit into your life in different ways. And it's okay if that person did not see you as a romantic partner, or if that wasn't the fit that you had with someone, and but it may still have worked out in a different way. So is that necessarily the only end goal that we should have with someone when we start talking to them or when we care about them? I realize that that's often the ultimate conclusion, right, in a lot of relationships. A romantic relationship, something which has sex, something which has an intimate conversation. These are what we see as the markers for something that we've been successful at. But I feel like even when we talk about a romantic relationship, it ends up being in the form of a conquest and not so much about falling in love with someone, because I think that's often a reciprocal process. And if that reciprocity isn't happening in the first place, then there may be something else that's missing. There may be something else that's happening there. And you may want to examine what is happening in the first place that is leading to an unequal relationship, right? But yeah, yeah, I think that's sort of broadly it. So, in the next few weeks, I think while our society and the world around us is largely focused on what these relationships are about, what romantic relationships are, and how romantic relationships are the supreme kind of relationships, I would also want you guys to consider the importance of friendships. And I would want you to consider the importance of all sorts of different relationships that exist in our lives, right? Like whether it's the relationship that you have with your mom or your dad or your friends, or and your lovers. All of those relationships are equally important. So it's extremely essential that we think about all of those relationships as a whole, as adding to the love in our lives, and not just the romance. So perhaps when you think about initiating a conversation next, it doesn't necessarily need to be with an end goal in life as much as just maybe just starting something that's about connection, that's about people. And all right, so we're getting some questions where people may be stuck in some naughty situations, complicated situations. So someone's asked that, being attracted to someone while I'm in a relationship. So I think that's perfectly natural. I think that's absolutely okay. But I think perhaps discussing that with your partner, like communication, becomes super important in these kinds of aspects, and trying to understand what the boundaries of your relationship look like. What do you want out of a relationship? And and I think remembering what you're getting out of your relationship, I think those become really essential to differentiate what is the difference between you crushing on someone or liking someone while being in a relationship. So that at least you're clear, if even if you do make that choice to exit out of a relationship, and if you're in a relationship and wish to remain committed within it, reaffirming the aspects of the relationship that are important to you apart from the attraction, and and maybe being transparent to your partner. That's the easiest way to reaffirm what that connection means, as opposed to fleeting attractions that are absolutely okay and occur in all of our lives. So so that's, apart from, okay, we have some more questions. I'm going to quickly answer that before signing off for tonight. Oh, okay. The next question is equally interesting. It's about how to say no, which also becomes really hard, right? Like when someone really cares about you or is expressing a great deal of affection, it becomes super hard to figure out how you don't hurt their feelings, but you also make it really clear that what you want out of something. So I think it's really important that we explicitly communicate where we stand about something. I think that's something that causes the least amount of hurt. I think sometimes when two people are on such different pages about a relationship, it ends up, I think there's always a chance that someone may get affected or may get hurt. But if if there's clarity about where the other person is, I think the repair is easier. And especially if two people want to get back to a friendship or get back to whatever they shared before the romance and the entanglement that happens within a romance, back to that place. So I think I can't emphasize enough on what the importance of communicative clarity looks like and what that means in situations like these. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it broadly. That for me, conversations are about just connecting with people and just trying to figure out what are ways in which we can let ourselves be seen, let ourselves be understood, and not forget all the amazing qualities that we have within ourselves as people, right? Don't forget that in the want to be liked by someone. And if you truly, really like yourself, and if you exude that quality about yourself, I can't think of anything that's more attractive than that. So that's all that I have for today. Thank you so much for coming and listening. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.